to another presentation for the Globe Sound Healing Conference. We have Michael Tellinger now. Hi, Michael.
Hello, David. Good to meet you. Good to see you.
Michael is a scientist, explorer, humanitarian, and internationally acclaimed author of 4 books: Slave Species of the Gods, Adam's Calendar, Temples of the African Gods, and Ubuntu Contributionism, a blueprint for the human prosperity. He is the founder of the Ubuntu Liberation Movement of Unity and Higher Consciousness. Ubuntu has grown to over 140 countries, sharing the one small town. He can change the world's strategy to bring prosperity and abundance for everyone. In 2007, Michael exposed the ancient vanished civilisations of southern Africa that left behind millions of stone structures dating back over 300,000 years. These are now recognized as the largest concentration of stone ruins on Earth. He's the founder of the Stone Circle Lodge and Museum. Michael connects the dots from a vast variety of subjects that allows us to make sense of the insane world we find ourselves in today. What have you been up to lately?
Working in all the areas there that you covered. We are working in more discovery, more exploration. I've just had a long weekend of a workshop to do with the ancient ruins and sound and energy and resonance and healing, and Adam's Calendar, and also the Ubuntu One Small Town strategy that is rapidly attracting attention with millions of people around the world. And I believe that we're very, very close to actually launching it based on the amount of financial financial help we've been offered over the past 3 or 4 months. It looks like it's all to fruition. So it's been a very interesting time during this lockdown period.
That's, it's amazing. What I've been talking about is around here. It's like when you do incredible work to help a lot of people, spirit kicks in and starts funding everything. It's really amazing. It's happening around here too.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and it's been a long time coming. It's been a 16, 17-year long journey now for me, and it seems like it's all revolving around right now. Literally, I'm talking about this week.
Uh-huh.
Right in the thick of it.
Right. We're about to get funding this week also. It's really quite amazing. So I got the big question I've been asking everybody, and it's really interesting to see what people say. And that is, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do to help people on the planet?
I would do exactly what I'm doing now, is our strategy, develop our energy generators with my partner, and offer it to the towns, communities, and the mayors of towns that want to implement the One Small Town strategy. And that's exactly what we're doing. So if I had all the money in the world, it will just help speed it up, and we would pretty much change the face of the world, change the way society functions very, very quickly, without forcing anyone, without becoming a dictator, just really offer a solution and let people walk towards it themselves.
Excellent. What's your presentation on today?
So I'm going to be talking about the power of sound, and how sound actually works, functions. What is sound? If we want to get closer to understanding or comprehending how sound heals, we first need to come to terms with what sound is and how sound works, how sound permeates everything in the fabric of creation and reality. And we have a closer understanding of how that works, then we can start to understand how sound is a healer, not only a creator of everything in our reality, but also can be used as a tool and technology for healing. Since sound is the source of everything, it can also be used to heal and cure all disease.
Cool. Well, go ahead and share your screen and let's begin. I can't wait.
Right. You see that?
Uh-huh.
You see that? Okay. So This is a longer present. I'll just talk you through the slides and explain what I'm talking about. The rest is all self-explanatory. So the healing power of sound, for those that don't know my work, these are just three of the books. One of them is missing. Adam's calendar is missing. People that haven't seen the covers, go to my website. You can read more about it and discover the work that I've been doing regarding the ancient civilizations and how that has led to the comprehension of sound, resonance, and frequency from the ancient civilizations to today, and how that can be put to use to help humanity in healing and especially the subject matter of this lecture. So one of the things I need to bring up as well is that pretty much everything we've been taught throughout our education system is a lie. Not everything is a complete lie, but they seem to keep this golden thread of truth that is surrounded by disinformation and propaganda. And that's really to keep us in a lower state of consciousness and not understanding who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. And because that often leads to, or that will lead to, us realizing how to use sound, not only to manifest our reality, but also to heal and cure all disease, which is the subject of this presentation. It seems that the bigger the lie that our so-called authorities and our leaders and our educators have told us, the bigger the lie, the more we seem to be inclined to believe it. And that permeates all of the areas of our knowledge: history, science, technology, health, biology, genetics, the universe, space, and especially religion and this thing called money. So I'm not going to talk about that. We're going to stick to sound, resonance, and frequency, the source code for everything. And to understand sound and resonance, we start right at the beginning, because sound and resonance is the common link to all creation. And pretty much all ancient civilizations talk about sound being the primordial source of creation, whether it's the sound of the creator or the resonance or the whatever you want to call it. The moment you start scratching into origin stories in ancient civilizations, very soon you come across the statement or the story of the sound or the word of God or the sound or the resonance of creation into creation. So it's very important. Even in the Bible, it said that God said, "Let there be light." So it's the sound of creation that actually precedes the creation of light. So it's a very important bit of information, because in fact, in that first statement of the Bible, it shows us a sequence of creation, how sound manifests. Then that sound very quickly becomes magnetic field. Moving magnetic fields create electromagnetic fields, which is light. So we see the sequence of creation. So when you start dissecting the Bible and getting the essence out of that incredible book, you start getting very important codes and information of very high knowledge of science and physics and the laws of nature around us. What we find, for example, in Christianity, we have the word. In Hinduism, it's the Om. The Egyptians would believe that the universe was sung into creation. In the Aboriginal creation story, the world was created with 3 sacred songs, and so it goes. It just never stops. And then we have the other interesting correlations, like we have the 6 days of creation that are connected to the basic structure of sacred geometry. In Hinduism and Buddhism, we have the 6 aspects of Om Mani Padme Hum. So we see that number 6, the 6 days of creation, and on the 7th day God rested. Those are just stories that are woven around the laws of nature and how things manifest, and how resonance and frequency manifest into physical form and create this amazing reality around us. In Egyptology, we have the 6 aspects of the all-seeing eye of Horus. Those are just 6 resonance ratios. And you start seeing the importance of sound, resonance, and frequency in ancient cultures and civilization, and how that connects to the fundamental structure of everything around us. So what is sound? Sound is the source of all creation. Sound is the breath of the creator. Here's a beautiful image that you've already spoken to John Stuart Reid, that's done an incredible work with a cymoscope and his research. So I use some of these images just to relate the visual stimulus. So what can sound do? So if sound is the source of all creation, that means that sound can pretty much do anything and does everything. And these are just some reminders of sound, of what sound does and what we've recognized sound to do. Sound levitates, it boils water, it creates light. Sound creates DNA. Sound heals and destroys pathogens. Sound moves beyond the speed of light. This is a very important bit of information that if there's one thing you get out of this presentation, I hope that this is the one that you finally, the penny drops for you, that the lie that we've been told that the light is the fastest thing, in creation, or light is the fastest thing in the universe, that is an absolute lie. That's the biggest deception in mainstream physics, that keep us in a box. It keeps us limited and doesn't allow us to think outside the box, because that's what we believe. So sound extinguishes fire. Sound makes things invisible. It energizes water and the air we breathe to sustain life. And sound is a precursor to electromagnetism. Let me just make this a little bit smaller so you can see it properly. I'm not sure how you see the screen. That seems a bit better. Right, so sound manifests into physical form. This is the most basic example how sound forms physical shapes. And I'm sure that John Stuart Green may have done this, but I'm going to show you a short little example of this. Every sound frequency, from the lowest frequency that is completely inaudible to us, to the highest that are completely inaudible to us. Every frequency in creation has its own specific cymatic pattern or cymatic shape. And here you can see how the sound coming from the bottom of the metal plate actually creates specific shapes that represent that sound frequency. And just because you can't hear that frequency doesn't mean it doesn't create or have a specific shape. Now, the lower the shapes of the cymatic pattern, the higher the frequency, the more compact and smaller patterns become. Now, keep in mind that our hearing ability only goes up to about 16,000 hertz or 16K. Anything above that, we won't be able to hear, but it still manifests incredible cymatic shapes. All right, you get the point. I'm going to go through this presentation at a pace because there's a lot of information. Like I said, just because you can't hear the frequency anymore, even if it's too high or too low, doesn't mean it doesn't have an effect on the shape of around us. It continues doing that. So here's, for example, an example of what the shape of the vowel A looks. And if you look carefully, if you memorize this image, it'll come back a little later when we start talking about the stone circle structures in South Africa. And stone circle structures around the world, but especially in South Africa, are right around me, what I've discovered and been researching for the last 13 years. This is John Stuart Reid's cymoscope work, beautiful. Every note on the piano, just to show you, it's not just sand on a metal plate. This is every sound frequency has its own specific shape, and so it goes. The cymoscope also shows you the human voice. I'm not going to show you this because I'm sure John Stuart Reid would have done this. Shows you how the human voice is a tool of infinite creation, because every frequency you speak, well, let's just show it while I'm talking to you. Every frequency you make with your voice has a very specific shape. And keep in mind that the shape that we see here is just a three-dimensional event that goes in all directions. And this is why our voices are so powerful, and we can manifest and create with our voices as we speak. We speak reality into existence.
When there's sound going on, it's hard to hear your voice.
All right, I'm going to just stop it there. That just gives you an example, an idea of how every subtle frequency in our voice has a very specific shape and a creation. So we create that shape. We are the creators of that. It comes from us. And this is, you start thinking about casting spells and manifestations. And this is why casting spells and spelling is so important in our lives, and manifesting things with our thoughts and our voices combined with our hearts and the frequencies all combined. This is very important in this whole nature of reality and how we use the power of sound to be able to manifest, and how, you know, wizards and ancient civilizations that had the knowledge before it was lost and it was removed from humanity by seemingly devious individuals. We were able to do this, use sound the way it's meant to be used, as a tool of creation and manifestation, instant creation and instant manifestation. Remember that every thought you have is also a frequency. It's a resonance and a frequency that can either manifest into sound or manifest into something that we're going to cover shortly. So an interesting story of sound is the Hindu creation story. Everything was so peaceful and silent, and Vishnu slept undisturbed by dreams or motion. From the depths, a humming sound began to tremble. It grew and spread, filling the emptiness and throbbing with energy. The night had ended. Vishnu awoke. All this does is tell us exactly the same story as the first line of the Bible. God said, "Let there be light." It's just spectacular. You know, the night had ended and light was created. So this is just beautiful when you see this. Here's the Aboriginal creation story. Time began when the supernatural beings awoke and broke through the surface of the earth. They moved about the earth, bringing into being the physical features of the landscapes with three sacred songs. And you start to, when you start to realize what's going on here, here's a beautiful little example. Imagine the metal plate. Imagine the surface of the earth, the frequencies coming out of the earth. Keep in mind that the earth rings like a bell. It never stops ringing. It keeps creating sounds and noises all the time. So the earth rings like a bell, the sounds of the earth hitting the surface of the earth, and then the soil and the sand on the earth starts to create the mountains and the shapes of the earth. That right now is probably what I believe happened on the earth more than anything else. We are told by geology and our so-called experts in this. And I say this because I've studied this very extensively through studying the stone circles and the ancient ruins, civilizations, the ancient gold mines, the processes, the tools, and the technology they used. And it changes everything that you think you knew, changes the way you think about, you know, geology, metallurgy, chemistry, et cetera, and the resonance of the bonds that hold matter together with chemical bonds and composition of elements and so forth. Everything changes once you start thinking about it from a perspective of sound, magnetism, and electromagnetism, and how that all works together, and how the one can change into the other. It's a beautiful thing when that penny drops. And I'm fortunate, I'm right in the middle of this ancient civilization that left behind these millions of ancient structures that are all energy generating, sound resonating devices that I'll talk about a little bit more. So here's a little example from Hans Jenny's cymatics video, the iconic documentary from the 60s. And this is powder. This is lycopodium powder on a plate. Keep in mind, this is not liquid or a jelly. So imagine this on a grand scale, what you're going to see here. Imagine the sand and the dust on the surface of the earth being energized from the toroidal field of the earth's magnetic fields, and the sound resonance that comes with that, and generating the mountains and the geology on earth as we know it today. You literally see mountains form.
Circular shapes appear, but these are in a state of continuous upheaval. The particles are pushed outwards from the center and inwards again from the outside, and at the same time they pulsate.
Just imagine this on a large scale. Once again, that is powder. That is not a liquid or a jelly or anything like that. It's just a powder that starts to behave like this once it's coming from below. And you can start imagining what is most likely behind creation of the surface of the earth, geological formations, the mountain ranges.
We can recognize the various patterns of the vibratory fields. They move to and fro, unite, and separate again according to the vibratory state of the surface formed by the membrane. And we can, as it were, move over a landscape which is in a state of vibration. If we intensify the note, if we produce a crescendo for the ear, the masses are hurled outwards. We see fountains, eruptions, explosions almost. But invariably, the particles return to the center. So that here again, even under these violently dynamic conditions, we find there is circulation.
All right, let's go on. This is actually a photograph from an Australian outback. And you can imagine this very much approximates what we just looked at, just on a grand, larger scale. And then you start seeing this kind of thing, and you start to realize, okay, hold on, this looks very much like the effect of cymatics coming out from the bottom of the earth, and the sand on top of the earth that creates these beautiful landscapes as a result of the cymatic or the sound generated by the earth. And when you see this kind of thing, this is clearly not the result of moving tectonic plates. This is very much organic, manufactured or organically created shapes as a result of sound. And we see this in many cymatic experiments. What sound does as well, it also inspires religious symbols. Why? Because sound is the source of creation. Sound is the breath of God. So it shouldn't be surprising that the cross is actually inspired by the knowledge of the ancient civilizations, of the fact that the cross is one of the, if you look at this is a beautiful photograph, one of the cymatic patterns that you see right at the center of it is this beautiful cross that gets formed. And since sound is the breath of God or the source of creation, and when I say sound, I'm talking about sound, resonance, and frequency, which is the same thing, just in different dimension, different mediums. And if when you see this cross, beautiful cross, you realize where ancient civilizations got their symbols, their inspiration for the symbols, for the religious symbols, the crosses and so forth, the Knights Templar, etc. Even the Sumerian and the Zoroastrian crosses in the circles, showing us that sound can levitate, sound can do all kinds of things, including levitation, like flight, which I suggest is what this symbol would be depicting. And then also the Native American medicine wheel, which is a cross in a circle, would suggest that they understood that sound was a healer, and they did use sound as a healer, as we know, the American medicine men. So sound is a tool in technology. It's just spectacular when you start looking at this. Clearly, the ankh was used as a healing tool during the Egyptian era. It's all over their art. Everyone knows by now the Royal Raymond Rife, the man who found the cure for all disease, through prime resonance frequency. He knew exactly which frequencies affected which cancer cells, because his universal microscope could actually see the cells react to the frequencies and could see the cancer cells, how they reacted, how they either got bigger or they got smaller and got affected and destroyed by the frequencies that he created. This is one of the books. This is a handwritten book of Royal Raymond Rife. It's in a library in Sedona, Arizona. I was fortunate enough to see it. And this book is filled with Royal Rife's handwritten records of the different frequencies and the different diseases that he studied. And it's just an absolute privilege and an honor to have been able to see this, because these things exist. And another guy similar to Royal Rife is George Lakhovsky with his multiple wave oscillator. And George Lakhovsky was as successful in curing cancer and other diseases with his multiple wave oscillator. And then he died a tragic death. I believe that he was killed because he became a big threat to Big Pharma, and they just got rid of him. And Anthony Holland in 2011 did his famous TED Talk where he shows how the frequencies that he discovered by accident as a music professor at Skidmore College in the USA, found that some of the frequencies, music frequencies, actually kill cancer cells. And in this video, he actually shows us some of the cancer cells, some of the frequencies that kill the cancer cells. I'm just going to show you a little bit of this because, you know, the rest you can conclude for yourself. It literally, what he does, he tells us.
These are the first videos taken. We showed these videos to our friends in the biology department. They said they hadn't seen anything quite like it. It seems to be a new phenomenon. These organisms are being shattered by our electronic signals. This is a harmless organism, almost friendly, a little blepharisma. And normally they're very fast swimmers, but when you approach a frequency to which they are vulnerable, they begin to slow down, then they stop, and then they begin to disintegrate within about 3 minutes. So first we attack pancreatic cancer. Take a good look at this slide, because the next one will look quite different. We treat these cells, they change their shape and size, and they begin to grow long, rope-like structures out the sides. They look something like antennas. I call them bioantennas for biological antennas. It's as if the cancer cells are trying to tune into our signal. We now know that cancer is vulnerable between the frequencies of 100,000 hertz and 300,000 hertz. So now we attack leukemia cells. Leukemia cell number 1 tries to grow a copy of itself, but the new cell is shattered into dozens of fragments and scattered across the slide. Leukemia cell number 2 then hyperinflates and also dies. Leukemia cell number 3 then tries to make another cancer cell. The new cell is shattered and the original cell dies. Now we attack ovarian cancer cells. This is a more distant shot. Here you see brackets coming up around the cells, showing groups of ovarian cancer cells which are being destroyed.
All right, I'm going to stop it here and just carry on. You can watch this video. It's available on YouTube. And unfortunately, Anthony Holland hasn't been able to do anything with it because Big Pharma obviously is not going to allow him to do that. So let's carry on. What other ancient devices were used for either healing or communication or sound frequencies? Obviously, the Ark of the Covenant was a great example of advanced technology because it was not only a communication device, because God tells Moses to sit on top of the ark, on top of the mercy seat, which is on top of the ark, under the wings of the cherubim. And when Moses sat there, God would talk to him and tell him what to tell the Israelites, give him advice and instructions. And then obviously the Ark of the Covenant was also used to defeat large armies. It would spark large sort of electric arcs and kill thousands of men. And it also destroyed the walls of Jericho. And I believe the way they did that, because they took the ark and they walked around the walls of Jericho for 6 times. The 6th time, with a blast of a trumpet and a shout from the men, the walls came tumbling down. So I suspect that we're dealing with a low humming frequency resonance that shook literally shook the walls of Jericho, like you hear a car with loud subwoofers coming past you and it vibrates your doors and your windows in your house. It's exactly the same thing. There's very low frequencies of sound, shook the walls of Jericho, destabilized the walls, and then with a sound wave, a pulse, with a shout and a blast of a trumpet, which I think probably describes like an EMP or electromagnetic pulse, walls came tumbling down. So they're giving us in basic English description of advanced knowledge and advanced technology in ancient times. And obviously sound levitates. This is a very, very basic example, but this is not how sound is used to levitating very large objects like 100-ton blocks or the pyramid blocks or whatever, because this is just sound, pressure waves in a confined chamber. And I'll talk about how sound levitates with more advanced technology. But this just shows you, gives you the idea that sound can levitate things.
You didn't want to go get sick.
And once you see things levitated by sound, we can imagine everything else. Right, again, I'm going to keep this short. If you have an idea, you can find this video. There are many videos on YouTube that actually show sound levitating. John Keel in 1880 famous for using sound to crush giant concrete blocks. John Keely would crush giant concrete blocks within a few minutes into a fine talcum powder. He would use sound to draw perfect holes into concrete and into rock. And he would levitate things with sound frequencies as well. A lot more can be said about John Keely, obviously. Peter Davey in New Zealand boiled water with sound frequency. And that's incredible because keep in mind that once you can boil water with a sound frequency, we basically can create free electricity, because at the moment, unless you have a nuclear power plant, well, they work the same way as coal power plants. It's just in a coal power plant, we use coal to boil the water, and then the steam from the water turns the turbines. So if we can find a sound frequency to boil the water, and we can generate the sound frequency from the sun, then we've created free electricity. So this is a huge discovery that I believe we'll be releasing to the world very soon with the One Small Town plan of action with the Ubuntu movement. And then obviously sound creates light. God said, let there be light. First phrase of the Bible, sound creates light. Very important. So you have to have sound to have light. You don't necessarily need the other way, but the two are so inextricably connected, you can't really separate them. That's a very interesting discussion, by the way. Sound makes things invisible. There are certain frequencies. This is from the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. This is August 2014. They found that sound acts as a cloak of invisibility, certain frequencies and certain conditions. And then they created this weird plastic pyramid-looking thing. And under certain frequencies, it made things, when they put things under the pyramid, it made things invisible. And I was wondering if maybe they got this idea from the ancient Eastern architecture that actually was used. What do monks do in the temples? Or in the monasteries? They chant, they make sounds. And is it possible that when they hit a certain chant, or a frequency of the chant, that reverberates in the monastery, in the temple? It acts the same as this pyramid that makes things invisible. And wouldn't that be a great way to, if you have a bunch of hostile people marching towards you, you'll get into the monastery and start to chant, and you become invisible. And what a great self-defense mechanism, isn't that? So sound puts out a fire. These kids already a long time ago. Sound technology.
We're both graduating from the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department at Georgia Mason University this coming May. We're here. We're just going to test out our device that we use that uses sound frequencies to extinguish flames.
I see this device being applied to a lot of things. First off, I think in the kitchen, it could be on top of a stovetop. But eventually, I'd like to see this applied to maybe swarm robotics, where it'd be attached to a drone, and that would be applied to forest fires or even building fires, where you wouldn't want to sacrifice human life.
Professor
I'm going to stop it there. But what if you watch? It took exactly about between 3 and 5 seconds for him to put that very hot fire in a pan with oil out. 3 to 5 seconds. That's incredible, right? So keep in mind what we should be doing with sound all over the world. Sound generates DNA. Luc Montagnier, who won a Nobel Prize for discovering the HIV virus, he spontaneously generated DNA by just putting a DNA frequency into water. you resynthesize DNA, and Luc Montagnier has done many other things with sound frequencies across the telephone. For example, they regenerated a virus, the frequency of the virus DNA from Paris to Rome, and resynthesized the virus in Rome. So this is all to do with sound resonance and frequency. But one of the key things for me is this, the fact that it's actually the sound of the air that we breathe. The sound, keep in mind, put your hand to your ear and breathe. You realize how loud the breath is when we actually breathe. Right? Some loud breathers keep you up at night, right? Because they breathe so loudly while they sleep. So as you breathe, the air goes into your lungs and it speeds up, it speeds up, it speeds up, and it makes a noise. The air goes into smaller and smaller orifices, you know, from the bronchus to the bronchi and eventually the alveoli. And by the time it reaches the alveoli, it's quite possible that the air and the sound of the air is actually moving at hypersound speeds. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about hypersound in a moment. And basically, that is when sound moves beyond the speed of light and does incredible things. And it is that energy of the sound that we breathe that actually energizes the oxygen in the air as it moves into the lungs. And you breathe the air in, the oxygen is highly energized, it gets absorbed into your blood, it goes and you use it in the body. And then once the energy has been used of the vibrating, energized oxygen, it is expelled out of our bodies. Otherwise, you know, I was at medical school studying pharmaceutics. They never taught us, what do we use of the oxygen? What is it exactly? Because we breathe oxygen in and then we breathe oxygen out, but they never teach us, but what about the oxygen is used up before the oxygen is no good? It's just an oxygen molecule, and it's the energy that it gets from the breathing that is used up. This is a very important subject that very few people are aware of. And again, they don't teach this in any medical school. So by the time it reaches, there's a lot more to be said for the structure of the alveoli, the hexagonal shapes of the alveoli, but I'm not going to go into that now. Sound is the ultimate source of free energy. Nikola Tesla obviously knew this. He used sound as the earth as a resonator. He knew that the earth rings like a bell, it never stops ringing. And he used that sound of the earth to generate his energy at the Tesla Tower at Weidencliff. And a lot more can obviously be discussed about this. This is just a short introduction to make you think about what Nikola Tesla actually discovered. And there he used what he called his radiant energy to make it available to everyone right across the world instantaneously. Keep in mind, as I said, sound moves beyond the speed of light. It moves instantaneously fast. I'll explain how that works towards the end of this lecture. Sound creates hurricanes. It's the sound resonance of sound that creates hurricanes. There's a patent that somebody took out in 2003, a patent to create hurricanes with sound. It's spectacular. Sound creates supercluster galaxies. In 2003, NASA reported they discovered sound waves 57 octaves lower than middle C, rumbling away from a supermassive black hole, 250 million light years away, in the key of B flat. I find that fascinating, that is B flat, and that they measured this, right? It's 57 octaves lower. That is huge. That's a cymatic pattern. Remember, we said that cymatic sound that manifests, the higher the frequency, the smaller the patterns, the lower the frequency, the bigger the shapes of the cymatic, the shape of the sound that manifests into physical form. And here's an image that NASA apparently took of this giant supercluster galaxy as the sound it makes, and it looks just like a cymatic pattern. That's sand on a metal plate in deep space. The picture on the left there actually looks a bit like that, like a podium powder on a metal plate. Magnetrons are in every microwave as a magnetron. Magnetrons are used in laser technology, laser beam, and military technology. Obviously, it's a very powerful electrical device, and it's basically a resonant cavity, high frequency oscillator that generates the energy. That's all a magnetron is. And you realize that many of the stone circles, I'm preempting now what we're going to find, many of the stone circles here in South Africa are just giant magnetrons built with highly dense quartzitic rock, resonating quartzitic rocks, whether it's granite, dolerite, or hornfels rock, very densely resonating quartzite stone that were used to build the walls of these giant 50-meter magnetrons among the millions of stone circles in southern Africa. And then obviously sound also creates light in a ball of water. It's called sonoluminescence. It's called star in a jar. So when you expose a body of water for a certain period to a certain frequency, it forms this bright, it forms a cavity in the water, and that cavity fills with light. It's called a star in a jar. It's completely the wrong explanation, I believe. I guess that depends on what you define a star to be. But what does that remind you of? It reminds me of the opening phrase of the Bible. Spirit of God moved over the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." And let me tell you, there's a lot more knowledge, fundamental knowledge of the laws of physics, the laws of nature, and the manifestation, and possibly the fundamental forces behind the creation of the universe, the solar systems, and the world as we know it. Sound moves beyond the speed of light. Already in 2005, Middle Tennessee State University, a bunch of undergraduate propelled sound several times faster than the speed of light. It was published in the American Institute of Physics in 2007, and then very quickly buried because they didn't want people to start thinking about this. They didn't want to really teach it because that makes us think much bigger things than we realize that everything is possible once we realize that light is not the finite speed. It is a nonsensical statement that light is the fastest thing. So what does this all have to do with ancient civilizations, which I'm really going to show how they used sound, because they understood sound, they understood resonance much more than we do today. We have forgotten that. It's been beaten out of us, and we've been pretty much turned into a species with amnesia. They used sound as a source of energy, and they used it as tools, and they use it for healing, as we've shown already. Do we have physical evidence of such tools and artifacts that used sound? Yes, we do. I have many of these tools and artifacts in my museum here in Little Waterval-Boven, Mpumalanga province, South Africa. And all these tools and artifacts, the Taurus stones and tools, are fundamental tools that are used in the generation of energy, the creation of scalar and vortex field energies, and then focusing those energies through the cone-shaped tools into what we can describe as Caesar beam technology. So this is just spectacular. When I discovered that the mountains around us are just covered in these cone-shaped tools, and that led to the discovery that was just completely ignored by all researchers, archaeologists, explorers ever. I'm the guy that discovered the cone-shaped tool phenomenon, and then also discovered that Ed Leeds Skalnin built Coral Castle with these giant blocks weigh the heaviest coral block at Coral Castle in Florida weighs about 30 tons, and this guy built it on his own, and it's just spectacular. And he was described to build it with ice cream cones, and this is why I called it the ice cream cone phenomenon. And that wasn't obviously a lie. That was really what he did. He must have known the cone-shaped tool phenomenon that we find in all ancient cultures as we find it. This is, once I realized that we're dealing with cone-shaped technology and these cones, suddenly I realized that cone-shaped tools are all across the ancient world. This is a cone-shaped tool from England, cone-shaped tools from Egypt, were used in breed processes. We don't quite know why, how they use them, but we also have cones. Pay attention. This is an image from Egypt. Cones and magnetrons. See those flower-shaped structures? So these are magnetrons and cones together. This is very important discovery. The Native American medicine men in their kivas, in their special ceremony, they take cone-shaped tools and they bang them together to make a sound as part of their ceremonies. And there must be a very important reason for that from ancient times. And the conical tower, the giant cone facing the sky at Great Zimbabwe, this is huge. This is one of the great conical tower or cone-shaped tools on Earth. Another one there was one in Babylon on the Byblos coins. We see very similar structure that was up there in the Middle East. And we have cones in Australia. We have cone-shaped hats throughout Africa and other islands where kings and priests, when they get inaugurated, they would wear these weird cone-shaped hats. Why do wizards wear cone-shaped hats? And why are wizards' wands often cone-shaped or crystals that go to a point? There's a very specific reason for this, because these cone shapes spew out solar Caesar energy or Caesar beams, Caesar beams. Here's a Sumerian statue of someone healing someone else with cone-shaped tools in his hands. I find it interesting to see which direction the tools are actually pointing. They're pointing away from the person being treated. Here's a Mayan deity. They're holding two cones with vibrating plates on his head and around his head. Clearly, there's a resonance that's being created that goes through his hands into the cones, and there's a very important reason for that. These are cones that are on display in the Rosicrucian Museum in San Jose, California, and these are actual cones brought from Sumeria with a cuneiform writing on it, commemorating the building of the Sumerian temples in Sumer. One of them refers to the building of the temple of Inanna, and you start seeing the importance of Edlied Skalnin holding two cone-shaped tools that the boy is described as ice cream cones, and he was levitating the giant blocks at Coral Castle, and they actually saw him do this. And I had corroborated the story last year in 2019 when I was at Coral Castle, and the director Laura May took us on a private tour and confirmed that that is actually true, that those two boys were snooping in there. They climbed over the wall and they were actually arrested. The cops took them away, and that's when they told the story. They saw him levitating these giant blocks with ice cream cones. And you ask yourself, well, why would boys make up such a story? Because they didn't make it up. This is real stuff. Remember, dragonflies don't have blood in their wings. Those what look like blood vessels are actually hollow tubes. And so when dragonflies vibrate their wings, they do flap them a little bit, but they vibrate them more. It's the frequencies of their vibration that send the frequencies through the wings. And this is why dragonflies are the most incredible flying creatures on Earth. And they go back 400 million years or whatever it is. And giant dragonflies used to exist that had, meter-wide wingspans and bigger. And what you find at the bottom of the dragonfly's wings are these tiny little cones that come out of these hollow tubes. So these cones shoot out the Caesar beam, the focused sound, and the sound creates toroidal fields around them and puts the dragonfly into a gravity-free toroidal field. And I'm coming to that jumping around a bit, but to understand, this is the importance of sound, resonance, and frequency in creation, in technology, in anti-gravity, and in healing. It is all connected. Everything is connected. And this is why when our education system tries to separate subjects into different boxes, that is one of the greatest crimes we can commit to compartmentalize our children's minds and our minds that take a lifetime to deconstruct later. Viktor Grebennikov in the 80s, the Russian scientist, inventor, that studied bugs and created his famous levitation platform. He realized that the bug's wings were too small, and this remains a problem to us today, or botanists or the insectologists, whatever you call them. They realize that the wings are too small to carry the weight of that beetle or the bug, and they haven't figured out how they managed to fly. Well, Viktor Grebennikov obviously figured it out, because he realized that the wings of these bugs are very similar to the wings of the dragonflies. They have these cones, tiny cones in their wings, so they vibrate these wings, and the cones create these toroidal fields, these gravity-free fields around the bug. Keep in mind this visual on the left, because I'm going to come back to that. This is just a quick example of how these bugs' wings levitate.
Today we're going to try to get one of these shells to hover over the other one. The original of this video is what inspired me to do this series.
That's beautiful. I love it. Right, so keep in mind that Caesar technology was only released to humanity in 2009. That's when it was published in the main sort of scientific magazines. And basically that is, Caesar beam, sound amplified by stimulated emission of radiation. That's what Caesar stands for, as opposed to laser. Caesars are infinitely more powerful than lasers. Caesar beams are infinitely more powerful than laser beams. Keep this in mind. Sound is the primordial source of everything, not light. And this is why Caesar technology is a very well-kept secret. It's used in the industrial military complex, and sound-based weapons, Caesar-based weapons, are the leading weaponry designed and manufactured by the military around the world. This guy here, Henrik Holter, in November 2017, won the Saab Award, military company, Saab Award for developing the most powerful antenna in history. It is thousands of times more powerful than any other antenna until now. It both sends and receives information, and all it is, a bunch of cones on a metal plate. You start seeing what we're dealing with here, right? Remember that the shape of those bugs' wings that Viktor Grebennikov used to design his flying platform? You start realizing how we imitate nature, or it's called biomimicry, how science, technology, and military is imitating nature to create modern technology. It's just spectacular when you start seeing this all around us. Keep in mind that in the backs of our eyes, in the retina of our eyes, we have what? Rods and cones. So the light, which also has a sound frequency, comes through the front of our eyes, through the iris. The iris is a little torus. So, and in the center of the torus is a lens. So the light and the sound frequency connected to that light comes through the little torus stone, or the torus, the toroidal field. It gets amplified through going through the toroidal field, and it hits the back of the eye, the retina, which is like a satellite dish. And in the back of that satellite dish, you've got these beautiful hexagonal structures. Hexagonal patterns are critical to maintaining perfect energy. This is why honeycombs and structured water is always hexagonal, and snowflakes and so forth, the perfect shape of water and ice and so forth. So in the back of the retina, we have these cones, tiny cones that go away, that face away into the optic nerve, and the optic nerve leads to your pineal gland. So you start seeing what's going on here, how the light and the sound that comes into our eyes is a powerful tool that we should be using. And this is why our pineal gland was such a very important organ that the ancient civilizations, or the global elite, whoever they are, went to a great deal of trouble to destroy our pineal glands, so we can't use our pineal glands, for example, for ESP, for communicating with extrasensory perception and so forth. Because we should all be able to do this. Our eyes are very powerful tools, together with our thoughts, our sound, our words, and our pineal gland should be able to use our eyes both ways, to get information and to send information. And we should all be bloody supermen and superwomen, being able to use our bodies as tools to manifest with our sounds and voices, and use our eyes as laser and Caesar beams. We are walking miracles made of sound and resonance. That's what's going on here. And all of this knowledge has been removed from us, but we're getting it back at a rapid rate. They took control of humanity in ancient times with cone-shaped tools. You see it in all these ancient carvings of these weird bird-headed and winged beings, the cone-shaped tools they had. But also look on the guy's arm here. There's a cone that goes into a flower-shaped watch, which is a magnetron-shaped watch, and energy then is focused into the cone that he's holding in his hands. That's very important. So they took control of the pineal gland and our DNA. They messed with our DNA. They shut down the parts of the DNA they didn't want to work. This is why we have so much dead and junk DNA that's waking up and giving us new extra abilities as the DNA reactivates itself, as our consciousness rises through frequencies and resonance. It activates our DNA. So the pineal gland, the frequency receiver and its transmitter, sometimes together with the whole center of our eye, the hypothalamus and so forth, is all referred to as the all-seeing eye of Horus, and the pineal gland is a critical part of that. And we see it, these logos and these images encoded in modern, the global elite cabal instruments of control and propaganda, or the TV and radio stations. It's encoded in their logos, the all-seeing eye and the cones of NBC facing the center, like the watch on the guys, the magnetron-shaped watch. These are all ancient symbols and codes that just remind them that they're in control, and we're just unaware of this. So the ancient stone ruins of South Africa are really advanced technology. They're not dwellings for people. And this was the big discovery that made me realize that the ancients had very advanced knowledge of sound, resonance, and frequency. And just like Tesla was using the resonance of the earth, all these stone structures, every stone circle, there are more than 10 million of these in Southern Africa, and Zimbabwe. They're all connected to each other through these channels and terraces that connect them. None of the stone circles stand separate. They're all connected to each other. And these are these beautiful flower shapes that I referred to earlier. These would be the original magnetron-shaped structures that generate an insane amount of energy. You see the channel there that comes out of the flower-shaped magnetron, and the channel that connects to another bigger channel that runs up away from us. So these were all in a giant grid of millions of these all together. And because they are cymatic patterns coming from the earth, represent cymatic patterns, this is why you find sacred geometric patterns that emerge out of these stone circles that are generated by the resonance and frequency of the earth. And you find all these encoded sacred geometric patterns in them, obviously, because they are a resonant frequency of the earth. So this is a very important discovery, that we're dealing with advanced knowledge of sound. So each stone circle is just an amplification device for the natural frequencies of the earth. And as I said, they're all connected together by these channels that connect them. And then the large spider's web effect that actually the agricultural terraces that cover about 450,000 square kilometers across Southern Africa. So they were not dwellings, as I said, they were advanced technology. The stones that make up the stone ruins are very strong quartzite, quartz content, lots of iron in the rock as well. They ring like bells. They got a very high resonance and acoustic properties, these rocks. They ring like bells. You can go on my channel and go on my YouTube channel, watch me ring these stones. They sound like bells. And this is why they were used in the walls of the stone circles, because of their resonance qualities to transfer the sound frequencies of the earth into the walls and to act like an amplification device. And this is really exactly what we use in modern day, silicon-based technology. The ancients just used the silicon and the quartz in the rock. They didn't have to extract it from the rock to put it into fancy shiny boxes so they could sell it to some schmuck. They just used it in its original form, because they knew exactly what they were doing, and they didn't have money. Remember, they didn't have money in capitalism. There's a very different organizational structure that had everything they needed and just created and did what they wanted. Obviously, digital data can be stored in crystals. This is common knowledge now, and an infinite amount of information, digital data can be stored in crystals, and even more so, actually more successfully in water as well, because water moves and folds on itself. So this is really important. This makes us realize that all these ancient sites that have this heavy quartz content or quartzitic content, silica content, these are all actually ancient, like Silicon Valleys, huge ancient memory banks that store in the quartz of these rocks a lot of information and the history of what happened around these ancient sites. So this is really important for us to start to figure out how we could possibly extract from many of these rocks and these ancient sites. Very obvious when I discovered that the stone circles of South Africa are machines generating incredible amounts of sound frequencies and magnetic fields and electromagnetic fields. And then the magnetron-shaped stone circles generate insane amount of energy. It became very obvious that all these ancient sites, including the pyramids and pretty much all the ancient sites, are also energy generating devices. This is what the ancients built. And these energy generating devices were either driven by sound of the earth, or light of the rising sun, or the light of the moon, or the light of the stars, because this is all energy sound frequencies. light and sound frequencies, right? So it switches the machine on. The light comes in from here with its sound frequencies. It hits a standing stone down a passage. It's like hitting enter on your computer. It switches the machine on. Then the sun moves, and on the winter solstice or the summer solstice or the equinox, it comes down another passage, and then the light hits another standing stone, and that hits the enter button again, and it makes the machine do something else. So these ancients built these machines to be driven by sound and light energies to perform certain functions by the movement of the stars. Once they built them, they didn't have to manage them anymore. We realized that because we've taken some photographs of some of these photographs have been taken that show us that some energies are still coming out of these, just like we've measured the energies of the stone circles. The symmetric patterns coming out of Stonehenge is a clear indication that it's a very clearly, carefully constructed machine. And this reconstructed image of it clearly shows us this is a very powerful energy generating device, Stonehenge, possibly one of the most powerful ones we have on Earth. And then we talk about Enki's mines and Enki's technology. Enki is a Sumerian deity, obviously, that spent a lot of time here in Southern Africa mining gold on a large scale. I'm just going to go through this. There's a lot of emphasis on this in the Sumerian text, and we found the evidence and these tools and the technology, which I believe are these magnetron flower-shaped structures. And here's just a comparison to show you how these ancient ruins were actually just giant magnetrons. You can see the channel running out of it, and it connects into the greater channel of the stone structures that were generating an insane amount of sound resonance energy that was being converted into magnetic and electromagnetic fields at the same time. Here we have a Sumerian seal that actually shows Enki on his throne, and these magnetron images all around him, which is fascinating. So there's just, again, supportive evidence that they used resonant magnetron energy, sound energy in essence, in ancient times. So what we have here is really every stone circle that you see is just a cymatic pattern from Earth. It's a representation of the sound frequency coming out of the Earth at that specific place. And we're dealing with a giant energy grid that covered large parts of Southern Africa. We know this because we've measured these frequencies. Like I said, sound frequencies, electromagnetic frequencies, magnetic fields, the loudness of it in decibels, and so much more. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it gets quite complicated. Just to let you know that a lot of research has been done on this, and we know they generate energy, and that has certain consequences. The sound frequencies that they generate has very important consequences to do with healing human bodies. And this is why I'm bringing this into this lecture, to show the power of sound as a tool of healing, and how the ancients were using it, and ancient civilizations had this knowledge of sound that also incorporated healing. Let's carry on. Adam's calendar is obviously an active vortex field. I should have taken it out of this presentation. It's got not much to do with this, but this giant vortex field is clearly some sort of a teleportation device. I truly believe that because Adam's calendar is right on the edge of a huge ancient gold mine that stretches 30 kilometers across, a big circular gold mine. It looks like an impact crater or a volcano, but it's an ancient mine filled with the residue of yellow sand that you find, the residue left behind by gold mining. And Adam's calendar sits right on the edge. You can see it there sitting on the edge looking down on this ancient gold mine. And I do believe that it was originally created as this very powerful toroidal vortex field generator, and it was most likely used as a beam me up Scotty device. You know, where do you want the gold? And beam it up to some other dimension. That's a huge discussion. Again, I go into this in much more detail with the science and the technology behind it. And that brings us to the combination of the Taurus stones and the cone-shaped tools. Very powerful combination. So when I say Taurus stones, I'm referring to these donut-shaped stones, and there are thousands and thousands of them scattered throughout South Africa. And these donut-shaped stones generate huge amounts of energy. So when we talk about torus fields, vortex fields, torsion fields, these are all the same expressions, the same words, different words for the same kind of energetic structure. These donut shapes that create torsion fields going in, torsion fields going out, vortex fields that meet at the center, and at that center, that's called what is often referred to as the 0 point. So these donut-shaped stones are very powerful energy-generating devices. We accidentally put one of them in a bucket of water. The next morning, we snapped only one photograph of it, my friend, and then the other photograph was blurry, but this is good enough. We can see thousands of tiny bubbles spiraling around, going into the center of the torus stone, which shows us there's a very powerful energetic field going into the center of the torus. Here is just a video showing how these very basic torus stones, they max out the EMF meter that measures in microtesla on the cell phone here. Another example how the torus stones emit electromagnetic fields and powerful magnetic fields. Here is another torus stone that maxes out our measuring device in microtesla. You can see that needle when dried up. Thank you. And now we demonstrate how the torus stones do push energy two ways. They push energy and they suck energy. And this is a very important discovery. This particular torus stone, in the way that it's lying, sucks energy. One way, it'll suck energy. If you turn it around, it'll energy. You can see the needle going in the opposite direction into the negative, as opposed to spiking and increasing. If you remove it, Chris, and let's see how the needle rises again. Just move right away. Sorry, I stopped it there, but you get the gist. So when we use a heat-seeking camera and just take a torus stones, this is what you find. One way up, it sucks energy. You see the cool 25 degrees, 25.1 degrees Celsius energy, heat energy. And then you simply turn the stone around and the other side, 43.2 degrees Celsius. So it clearly shows us that these torus stones are energy generating devices. They either create energy or they suck energy. And this is how the ancients were using this to generate energy. Here's another image that actually shows when you hold the stone in your hand, the image on the right is actually the one you should look at first. And then 30 seconds later, look how the guy's thyroid gland here, it goes bright red. Within 30 seconds, you can see how it's affecting his body temperature and his thyroid gland here. It's spectacular. And this is the famous torus stone that I took to Nassim Haramein in 2013. And that's the one that crashed the TSA system at Doha International Airport in Qatar. That story is on my website. I tell it many times. And it's just a spectacular story, which basically Homeland Security, TSA security at the United States check-in in Doha proved through their technology that these stones are very powerful devices because they hauled me off the plane. And then the captain told me when I came back on the plane that whatever was in my bag crashed the TSA security system. And that was the stone that did it. So just to remind you, everything is a toroidal field. Everything in our reality manifests as a torus, this donut-shaped structure. And toruses are the fundamental structure and probably the most studied in mainstream, the most advanced areas of physics and science, and especially what one would call a scalar knowledge, scalar energy today. Sound manifests as a torus. Since sound is a primordial source of everything, including healing, but sound as the manifestation of everything in creation manifests as a torus field. You should know by now that every time your heart beats, it creates a powerful toroidal field around your body, and that sound frequency of your heart that creates that toroidal field around your body. And because sound moves, that sound then creates magnetic torus. The effect of the sound of the toroidal field creates a magnetic field, and because that magnetic field is moving, it becomes an electromagnetic field. So it's the beating of your heart that creates this electromagnetic toroidal field around our bodies. And this is why when people come together, feel each other's vibe, we feel each other's vibration. You'll go to a party and you say, oh no, I went to the party, there was a really bad vibe at the party. It's a vibration. So we use the words in our language and we often forget that it actually describes the resonance, the sound, and the frequency of an event or a situation. We either resonate with somebody or you don't resonate with somebody. There's a clash. You don't get on. And these are all just to do with frequencies, whether it's generated by the mind or the heart. And everything that happens, whether we speak, every sound we make, everything takes on a toroidal shape, every letter of the alphabet, etc., etc. And the moment you make a sound, the moment sound is created, it also becomes a scalar tool, scalar energy. Now, scalar energy is very badly understood, and many people that are teaching it are often actually teaching it incorrectly, because you can't really say scalar waves. Just the word scalar waves is already an incorrect description, because scalar energy doesn't really travel in waves. It's an instantaneous effect. We can sort of describe it in waves, but it's really the incorrect description. So, and this is where you start realizing that the sound that goes into the center of a toroidal field and enters that 0 point, that's where the magic happens. And that's where the scalar energy, imagine Russian dolls. So that's really what we're dealing with. One torus, bigger torus, bigger torus. And this is the entire nature of reality and the universe as we know it. Everything in creation is really just an integrated toroidal, fractal toroidal nature of reality is what I call it. All generating from sound and manifesting into physical form when light joins it, and becomes a really exciting exploration of manifestation and creation process that we are very rapidly becoming conscious of. And I think soon we're going to be able to create and co-create as we should be able to. So this is just really important, the whole toroidal structure, even color, toroidal shape of color. So because every sound frequency is connected to a light frequency. Most of the light frequencies we can't see. We can only see a very narrow sliver of light frequencies, right? But there are an infinite number of light frequencies that we can't see. Remember, the field is infinite. It goes infinitely low frequencies and infinitely high frequencies. We can't even imagine where it ends, because seemingly there is no end. And it's all interconnected in these toroidal fields, the sound and the light together. I'm not really going to show you this because this is going to take up too much time. Basically, go online and watch Eric Rankin's Sonic Geometry. This is really important because you know what? Let's just show it. Let's just show it.
As an experiment, let's take a look at the numbers found in basic geometric shapes, then apply those numbers as vibration cycles to hear the tones they produce.
60, 60,
First,
60
let's listen to
degrees,
what the
the
180 total degrees contained in a triangle sound like. And here's a squares and circles 360 in cycles per second. A perfect octave up from the triangle. What about the pentagon at 540? That sounds like a harmonic fifth of the other two. That's interesting. What are these tones? They are F sharp and its perfect harmonic fifth of C sharp. Let's keep going. What does a hexagon 720 sound like? Another F sharp. Here's a 7-sided septagon, which totals 900. This is an A sharp, which happens to be the note required to complete an F sharp major chord in perfect 3-part harmony.
So I'm just going to stop it there. I think please go watch this full documentary. It's about half an hour long. It's a life-changing experience when you realize how even the basic sacred geometric shapes that start with spheres and circles and Plato's Platonic shapes, the 5 fundamental shape structures, how the angles of those shapes are the frequencies that actually create these beautiful harmonic chords. What I find fascinating is that according to this, God created the universe in the key of F sharp. That blows my mind, that there's actually a fundamental key to creation. Key as in unlocking a door, key in musical keys on a piano. You start seeing the connection that keys and sound are the same thing. They open knowledge and information to everything. Let's carry on. So basically we bust the dogma of science by knowing that there are no real particles. Ultimately, particles just are structured toroidal fields, smaller and smaller toroidal fields that become bigger and bigger toroidal fields. So whenever we talk about subatomic particles, that's actually a misnomer. It's just an infinitely smaller toroidal field that our so-called quantum particle physicists misinterpret as particles or subatomic particles or the God particle and so forth. It's just tiny toroidal fields that get smaller and smaller. So there is no such thing as a God particle or the smallest particle. That's an insane idea or an insane thought that mainstream physics keeps shoving down our throats. So this is important to realize how powerful the sound, resonance, and healing using sound as a tool becomes. Electron is just a coherent resonance in a toroidal field. This is supposed to be an image of an electron. There is nothing physical there. You just actually see the resonance, the frequency of what we would call an electron. And then obviously here's a toroidal model of an electron that is now being promoted, that the electron is a toroidal field itself. And then atoms are toruses. Any mainstream physicist today will tell you that the atomic model that they teach us at school is completely wrong. It's completely incorrect. I go into a lot of detail about how it was completely nonsensical. Rutherford's model in 1900 it was when he proposed the structure of the atom, and we still stick to that structure of the atom today, which is just nonsensical. Everything manifests in the toroidal field, including electrons and any other subatomic particles, including atoms, etc. Here's an image of a toroidal field of a carbon monoxide molecule, for example. So there are some examples of these images, these scans that actually indicate these toroidal fields. The solar system is a torus, for example. The galaxy is a torus, and supercluster galaxies are toruses that NASA showed us that rings at 57 octaves below middle C. So this is what I think the universe as we know it actually looks like. This is Alex Gray's famous drawing of the fractal toroidal field, the multi-dimensional toroidal nature of reality. This is how I imagine everything just fitting into each other, and there's no smallest and there's no largest. It goes in forever and it goes out forever, like the Mandelbrot set of fractals, right? It just gets bigger and bigger and smaller and smaller. It's spectacular. So keep in mind that everything is sound, and because everything is sound, everything is also magnetism, because sound creates magnetic fields. And then these moving magnetic fields, because sound moves, create electromagnetic fields. So this is just a very quick example how everything is magnetic.
You might not think of water as being magnetic, but it is, and so are graphite, aluminum, and glass. This is a new and different category of magnetism called either para or diamagnetism, and it's different from the magnetism that you're used to. You're probably already familiar with ferromagnetism. Ferro means iron. An unmagnetized piece of iron, or nickel, or cobalt, becomes a magnet in the presence of a magnetic field. The effect is strong and lasts even after the magnet is removed. Paramagnetism is a similar effect, except that it's much weaker and temporary. Aluminum is a good example of a paramagnet. And so is oxygen, which is attracted to magnets. Here, I have a few milliliters of liquid oxygen, which sticks to the magnet. I'll explain why later. Gadolinium oxide and cupric sulfate are good examples of paramagnetic substances. Cupric sulfate is a salt that can be picked up by a magnet. Diamagnetic materials are exactly the opposite of paramagnetic. They are always repulsed. They would rather die than be in a magnetic field. An important example of a diamagnetic material is graphite. This specially made pyrolytic graphite is repelled by a magnetic field. Don't be confused. This is not static electricity or eddy currents. Graphite is repelled by a magnet, always, both by the north and south end.
Really important to realize how magnetism and sound work together and really are inextricable. It's very clear to see how magnetic fields create toroidal shapes. So you can see very basic magnetic field. And then this is a beautiful example of a full magnetic field spectrum, a balanced magnetic toroidal field that you get energy going in and energy going out in opposite directions, spiraling in opposite directions, and where they meet in the middle, it would be called the 0 point. And then you got what's called the accretion disk at light coming out at the equator, or the equator accretion disk. And this is what NASA is studying in the creation of new solar systems and new stars. They talk about the planetary disk, or the solar disk in which planets are formed, or the galactic disk. So we're talking from the smallest to the largest. It's always the same. The toroidal fields that have the 0 point, the energy in the center, call it the sun or whatever you want to call it, that 0 point, and then the galactic or the equatorial disk, the accretion disk that is created from there. Very important when we start expanding our minds to other things. There you go, the balanced, showing that beautiful accretion disk in the middle, and it emits energy in a plane, and that's where the matter is accumulated in that accretion disk. You see it, as I said, in solar systems and in galaxies and supercluster galaxies and so forth. And we can also now see what magnetic fields look like under the ferrolens cell. Now keep in mind, this is all connected to sound, right? So when you hear magnetism, it's always, you can always connect it and revert it back to sound, right? Keep in mind, this is how speakers work. Speakers work with magnets that create sound, and it works the other way as well. And when you take a ferrofluid, for example, and you bring a magnet close to it, you see these tiny little cones. Can you see the connection between cones in nature, cone-shaped tools? Cones create Sazer technology, or create Sazer beams. You start seeing the interconnectedness between sound, magnetism, electromagnetic fields, and also the shapes that are manifested in connection with this in nature. And we start seeing how sound and magnetism affects the shapes in nature around us. Here is a speaker magnet under a ferrocell lens showing us these little cones that point to the center. Well, what does that remind you of? It reminds me of this guy's watch, right? That magnetron-shaped watch, which tells us that they knew exactly what this is not an accidental image. They tell energy and the technology they were using. Cone-shaped tool that points towards that magnetic magnetron-looking watch, and then that creates an energy that goes through his hands and his fingers into the pine cone that he's holding in his hand. This is a very advanced drawing, or showing us very advanced technology using sound, magnetism, and so forth. And now we start realizing how nature and flowers works, and how flowers generate their energy, and so much more. And this is we're just scratching the surface here once we start talking about the flow of energy through flowers and plants and trees. And then obviously that also then brings into it monoatomic element and the release of monoatomic elements. And it's just a beautiful story once you start completing it and expanding it to all the other aspects of it. What this shows is that these ancient structures, the temples in Egypt, is just advanced technology on a gigantic scale. We just could never see it before. And the discovery of the stone circles being energy devices, the pyramids being energy devices, and so forth, is now very obvious. These obelisks with giant vibrating antenna that they ring like bells, just like the stones in the stone circles. These obelisks, when you put your ear to this obelisk, it literally rings like a bell when you tap on it and hit it. And you realize that these were not temples built for worshiping, offering food to gods. These were ancient machines that were generating energy through sound resonance. And this is really important. There are too many pillars. And when you start seeing it from aerial photograph, you realize that these temples had a roof. So it was like an Eskimo pie. It had a roof on top with rocks and concrete and quartz, quartzitic roof, and then a base of quartz, and these vibrating pillars in between, generating huge amounts of energy vibrating from the bottom. And these are just giant circuit boards with amplification, resonant chambers, the Parthenon in Greece. Remember, it was the mountain of the gods. Humans were never allowed to go up there. And very important, these are just ancient generating energy devices. Here's more examples of giant amplification resonant chambers. Now they're very destroyed, sitting on the edge of a giant circuit board. This has got nothing to do with dwellings for people or animals. Just like the stone circles, this has got nothing to do with dwellings for people or animals or churches or places or worship or offering food, none of that. You start seeing the vibrating pillars on a quartz platform with an amplification chamber there in front of the vibrating pillars, and you start realizing that these temples are just templates for giant circuit boards, energy generating circuit boards. This is the temple in Persepolis, Iran, and that's a dead giveaway. It's one of the greatest examples of actually that these ancient temples with circuit boards generating energy on a gigantic scale. Just quartz and silica, the way we use silica and quartz in modern technology today, they just use it on a gigantic scale that we just recently figured out. Microprocessors become gigantic macro processors. And here we go. Nothing surprises anymore because now we figured it out. And when you combine water and silica, you have very powerful energy generating devices and machines. And the pyramids are the same. And obviously, it seems to me now that human sound may have been used at some stage. Human sound of people, these amphitheaters, you see those perfectly symmetrical amphitheaters that are incredibly sensitive. You can whisper on that stage and everybody can hear you. So they would fill those amphitheaters with people, put on a show, make them scream and shout and clap their hands. And all that sound of those people, very amplified, goes into this long line of vibrating pillars that takes that vibrational energy and it always connects to the circuit board on top of the mountain there. And so it's the sound frequency of the people in that amphitheater that somehow initiated that circuit board on top of the mountain, which obviously is very badly destroyed. And we see, and that circuit board then started to work, do something it was supposed to do. And it was initiated by human sound. Here we have another example. There's the amphitheater, the vibrating row of pillars that plug into the bottom of the circuit board, which is really badly destroyed. Here's another example. There you see the circuit board right on top of the hill, and the amphitheater that activated it is at the bottom edge of the hill. And here we have Algeria, Africa. Here we have the amphitheater right in the center of the original circuit board. And nothing has changed. In 2020, the ancient circuit boards and temples, circuit boards just became churches with, towers and cone-shaped tools at the top of churches. Here we have cones shooting up, turning the sound from the church hall, which is the ambient chamber, the amplification ambient chamber that pushes the sound into the tower and up into the cone that creates a spiral effect of the sound and turns the sound, gets emitted out of the top in a Caesar beam fashion. Again, I can talk a lot more about the physics of that. It's really interesting and fascinating how this sound and the cone shape does that with such ease. And we see this all over the world. And it's not just churches, it's mosques as well. And then obviously the big one, the Vatican, wherever there's a dome, we see the Illuminati at work because they clearly understand the importance, because that dome is, in essence, in a way, sort of a half a toroidal field that captures energy. And then the mystery of the medieval cathedrals. It's just spectacular. Our modern day architects don't really know how they built these cathedrals. It remains a giant mystery. There's all kinds of arguments about how they built them. But these cathedrals inside is just a giant ambient chamber. People go in, they clap their hands and they make a noise. And these pillars carry the energy up to the roof. And generally they are dome-shaped roofs that then create even more amplification. Above the roof, we have these towers, these spires, these cones that shoot the energy up into the sky. So something was going on with using human sound and human energy to shoot it up into the sky to somehow keep up a matrix, keep up an energy grid in the sky that is there to either protect us or to keep us ignorant and dumbed down. Who knows? This is still a huge area of research that we need to come to terms with. And it's not only the ambient chamber, but it's also the shape of the light that amplifies the acoustic effect inside the chamber. And this is why you see all the cathedrals have magnetron-like windows, magnetron-shaped windows. So when the light goes into the cathedral, the magnetron-shaped windows actually amplify the light and affect the light and the sound frequency of the light. So it goes into the ambient chamber called the church or the cathedral, and there that sound is amplified and gets shot up through the cone-shaped tools at the top of the towers. This is just spectacular technology, and we think these are churches built for us to go and worship. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got everything to do with generating and harvesting energy on a scale that we could not have imagined. Here's a spectacular photograph taken by a woman called Annie in Sweden. It just shows you the toroidal field effect that's created by the sound coming out of the top of that church tower. Isn't that incredible? Sometimes a picture tells 1,000 words. It's quite amazing. So this is what happens, our cities and our business centers has really been turned into giant energy generating devices. We never stop making a noise. The city blocks and city grids are just like giant circuit boards. There's traffic, there's people, there's noises, there's phone calls, there's just noise all the time that's shooting up the sound into the sky. So it's all about sound, whether sound is used to do us harm or sound is used to brainwash us through the frequencies in our TVs and radios and cell phone towers, or to do us damage or to make us sick with 5G or whatever it may be. It's all to do with sound, resonance. But sound can also be obviously used as a healer. And this is what it's all about, because sound is a primordial source of anything. We as humans generate huge amounts of sound energy. We never stop making a noise. And all these giant city grid energy generating devices are connected, like the stone circles are connected by the channels. Our cities are connected by these channels that never stop making a noise. We call them highways. It's just incredible how the ancient civilizations and their technology here in South Africa with 10 million stone structures generating energy have been replicated around the world in the form of cities that never stop making a noise. A city that we never stop making a noise. It's all about the sound. And now suddenly I understand what Morpheus meant when he said, people are the source of energy that hold up the matrix, some sort of an energy grid in the sky. Let's bring this back to the healing aspect of the stone circles, the healing energy of the stone circles and many ancient structures. For example, Samos Managij and the Bosnian Pyramid, the tunnels underneath that go towards the Bosnian Pyramid, the Ravne tunnels. Sam has had incredible healing effects from the frequencies and the negative ion content, the high concentration of negative ions in those tunnels and the constant frequency of the Schumann resonance that they measure in there, 7.883, I think it is. It never changes. And the ongoing, for 15 years now, the ongoing healing effects that they've experienced in the Ravne tunnels at the Bosnian pyramids is spectacular. And I highly recommend you look more into that. And I've had the same repetitive reports of people experiencing incredible healing by going into the stone circles when they come on the journeys and the tours with me of the stone circles of South Africa. Right around us here, we go to many of the stone circles. And people have experienced all kinds of healing. The most extreme was a woman from Vermont that came on one of the stone circle tours with us in 2014, I think, and then came back in 2015, was cured of cancer. So this clearly is an ongoing pattern. And until recently, I was thinking about why is it that these stone circles generate these healing energies? And as you work with it and you start to understand sound and frequency, it all starts to make sense. These stone circles, from what I've shared with you, are amplification devices for the natural frequencies of the earth, whether it's the Schumann resonance or other natural frequencies of Mother Earth. So they are amplified to the stone circles. Now, when you go into the stone circle, you are then being exposed, whether you know it or not. The trillions of cells in your body are exposed to the natural frequencies of Mother Earth and the many harmonics of those frequencies. So they vibrate and resonate in many harmonics. And so whether you know it or not, your cells in your body start to vibrate with the good healing energies of the earth. You become one with the frequencies of the earth. And that is good. We should be resonating with the frequencies of the earth, not resonating with the frequencies of cell phone towers and computers and other electronic machinery. That's destructive to our cells and our bodies and our organs. So as you spend more time in the stone circles, they resonate the cells in your body, and you start to heal whether you know it or not. In fact, we have now through shamanic teachings and shamanic downloads recognized which stone circles are good for which parts of our body. Some are good for the intestine, some are good for the heart, some are good for the kidneys, some are good for the blood, some for the DNA. We've actually started to identify, and I plan to experiment more research regarding the stone circles and the actual healing aspect. So we have not just oral, people telling us that they've healed, but we actually have some proper medical and scientific evidence of the frequencies of these stone circles and how it works. And this is really on that note that I'm going to end and explain that the healing happens through basic cymatic patterns, the natural frequencies of the earth that are amplified by the stone circles, and any other structures that seem to have been built by the ancient civilizations that use the frequencies of the earth and amplify the frequencies of the earth. They would automatically become healing chambers because you are resonating, your body will resonate with the natural frequencies of the earth. And on that note, thank you for listening and getting a deeper understanding of the importance of sound, resonance, frequency as a tool of creation and a tool of healing.
Wow, Michael. Just a second while the top of my head returns. So, of all of this, what are you the most excited about to be able to help people?
I'm very excited about the fact that we are very close to getting funding for our One Small Town strategy. It literally, we have a number of very wealthy billionaire individuals that have come forward over the last 4 months during lockdown, actually, 5-6 months, and have offered to fund this. And it's really just coming into motion now. It literally from this coming week, we should start seeing some of the funding land. When you start moving large monies around borders and different countries, believe me, it's not easy. It's not simple. Suddenly the central banks get involved, governments get involved, they get suspicious. What is this money for? So it's a long and tedious process when you start moving large amounts of money around. But we're getting very, very close to launching this. And this will basically allow us to launch the One Small Town strategy with our new energy technology, the free energy devices, which will also lead to new technology, new healing centers, new materials. Everything will change once we have our own energy generating devices for every town and every community, so that they can start taking control of their own destiny and creating prosperity and abundance for themselves.
I love it. It seems like there's as far as the research, there's a few things. I mean, one is healing, one is energy, one is consciousness, and then really creating community with so there's not the whole money thing that's tying us down and holding everybody back. So it seems like for the future, there's research in a lot of these areas you're talking about. There's such potential. I mean, that's what's so great about this, is to resonate the potential of ancient knowledge and our ability to manifest with our own mind. That's really critical. I think that's like where people are starting to open their heart, but there's very few people that have gotten to the point where they are able to manifest with the vibrations of their own mind. Now, it's interesting because I was thinking about, as you went through different things, the research that could be done with the things you were talking about. So if we were to look at the research in detail, find out exactly what's going on with, cones, magnetrons, and the torus, and figure out precisely how that works within the human body. Now, we can also, the other aspect is to simply meditate more, go into the zone with sound more, until higher beings give us all this information that's already out there, and then finally we get it returned to us. So there's a question whether the research or the actual downloads are going to come first. Right?
Yeah, I think there seems to be some sort of divine plan.
Uh-huh.
30 years ago, I wouldn't have dreamt that I would be saying this, but I actually do believe it now. There's definitely a divine plan. Even if you look at what's happening around the world with the bloody pandemic and politics, and how some people are rising up and draining the swamp of the political creatures that have destroyed our world, and the medical people that are coming up and saying, we have cures for disease. It's all coming together. There seems to be a high divine plan that is preparing some people, bringing some people into it, and some of us want it now, some of us want it immediately, but that's not necessarily going to solve the problems. It might even create more division, more conflict, because some people will be too scared and nervous. So, it's taken me nearly 17 years to get the One Small Town strategy activated to this point. So it's been a long journey of, never say die, perseverance and belief in that there must be a better way. And if I was given the money 10 years ago for One Small Town or the Ubuntu movement, I would have messed it up. I wasn't ready then.
Right.
And, so I'm far more grateful and humble now that it didn't happen even 3 years ago, even 2 years ago.
Right.
Because what we have now is so much more. There's more centeredness, there's more calmness and collectedness, knowing that what we have will be implemented correctly and not in a rush to try and save the world overnight. There's a very simple, methodical implementation plan that people will see everywhere. Once we launch this, once we push go, it's going to become unstoppable, because people all over the world see what's happening, whether it's in the USA or UK or South Africa. No matter where that first initial move of a small town starts to happen, that will spread across borders instantly. Everyone will be aware of it. And that'll create the domino effect across all countries, because it'll come to the new technology, the energy devices that we will give every town and mayor that wants to implement this. We'll give it to them free. All they need to do is ask for it. And this is why we've not sold out the technology. We've been offered a lot of money for the technology, billions of dollars, I must tell you, and we've not sold it out, because every time somebody offered us money, there were greedy capitalists that wanted to take control of it, own it, and then offer it to the world and just become the new owners of electricity and control the world. And that's not what this is about.
Right. Well, I don't know if you know, we set up the Medical Sound Association. We've now garnered a whole range of doctors and sound therapists, and the whole goal is to create research protocol based on frequencies, combinations of frequencies, musical flows, which is the torus, right? And then even the relationship of musical interval relationships within the body. And so what the plan is to get enough people involved in the association so that it can never be taken down, right?
Yeah.
And the whole point is to really research, not on a proprietary level, but in a humanitarian level, to really figure out how does this all work. I mean, it's not, we really know nothing, and to really
we don't.
Yeah, and all of the research you've done gives even a clearer path as the direction forward in that area. The other area that we're working on also is a new educational system. We got a $100,000 grant to create. We created 2,500 exercises for 2 Montessori schools based on the physics of vibration and expression and geometry. We don't call it sacred geometry. Well, maybe yet. We might call it sacred geometry, right? And so to really, and we've got like billions as well coming in to do both of these and to work with the technology. So what's happening is the whole world is changing because there's all this funding for people that want to help the planet. And beings on the other side are totally supporting it, right? So it's inspiring. It's just inspiring.
What I've been saying for many years now is that it'll be the billionaires that'll actually end up saving the world. Because billionaires, and I'm talking about the conscious billionaires,
right?
That cabal and etc. That suddenly, they're good people. They've made a lot of money, and now they realize what is all this money for? The world is going to shit. Like, my children are going to live in hell. So unless I use my money to fix the world, my children are going to have a miserable life, and they might actually lose everything. They might end up being slaves to some cabal puppet master somewhere. So these very wealthy individuals that are suddenly realizing that if they don't use their money for the good of humanity, it's all a waste of time.
That's right.
Waste of a life. So that's happening. And I've always expected it to happen. I was hoping it would happen sooner, but it seems to be happening now.
Just the perfect time.
Convergence now. They're like, you mentioned there's a convergence of what you're doing. And we're just a few of the people. There's many more out there that are doing amazing projects. I do believe that the one small town thing is a thing that'll fly across the world, that'll help people like you and others to get even more funding and create a one small town situation so that you have the most incredible research lab that nobody could have ever imagined because of the small town scenario. Because now you have everyone in your town on your side wanting to contribute whatever they can to make it as successful as it possibly can be.
Right.
So once the one small town launches, it's the end game. You can never go back to anything else other than liberating the human spirit to create with infinite potential.
I put together a movie called Thrive Forward to be able to visualize what it would be like when we're all abundant and everybody has healthcare in amazing ways and we can heal each other and heal ourselves again. And then the final one is, once all of those stressors are gone, is to work on the relationships. And those are the main things that cause stresses in relationships, is abundance and health, right? So then it's just a matter of time before everybody's like, I love you too.
Once people lose the fear of having to work to survive, and where am I going to get enough money to pay rent and buy bread and milk and feed my children and keep a roof over my head. Once people lose that fear, when they know that that's automatically provided, and you have the best of what you choose once you're in a community that cares for you and you care for that community because you're part of that community, you contribute 3 hours a week, or the model sounds about, it's a very simple thing. And then you're free to do what you want, and everything is created in abundance. Once you live in that kind of society and a community without fear, the explosion of the human spirit and the creative spirit just literally goes nuts. We can't imagine what we as humanity will be capable of once we unleash that human potential. It is going to be biblical.
Yeah. When we go to, going to a place of peace and stillness, as opposed to all this chaos that's created by, trying to make it. And when you do that, then you reconnect to the natural energies of earth and spirit. And then it's a party. Well, thank you.
David, thank you. Thanks for contacting me, and I hope that those that engage in this lecture enjoy it, and it opens their eyes to new possibilities. And go look up the One Small Town strategy and see how you can help spread that message as well.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for all the work you do and what you're helping to bring to the world. May it happen sooner than later.